We'll be starting today on Amid Lamed, just over halfway down the page, the line beginning V'chein hu beis lapshus. And we're in the middle of an inyan whereby we had said that the shaykhis of the essence, the way that Ein Sof is mislabish in the essence spiros, is comparable to the way the neshama is mislabish in the guf, and the neshama is mislabish in the esokeichus hanefesh. So, which goes back to the beginning of the Maimah, which was our basic shaykhus. We said, how are we going to understand Neseris Atzilus? We're going to understand through this from Keichus HaNefesh. But in this paragraph, which began on the end of the previous page, we started V'hini be'emes eina mashal doim lenim shoklan. It's criticizing this model and saying that it's not comparable, because the way the neshama is mislabish in the guf is it can't be mislabish. It's mugda in that relationship with the guf. It may be not nitfas, which we said would maybe taking it a bit too far, but it's definitely mugda, meaning that it can only be in that guf at that time. It can't be in another guf, and in that way, it can't be. It's not doima to the spheres, because what we'd be saying then is that the hashpa or the ha'ara that is nimshach from the Ein Sof is mugda, is mugbal in that hashpa, and that would be problematic. And furthermore, what we're going to start saying today is that it's not just the relationship of the klolis hanefesh with the guf, but also the way the nefesh is misyachis to the esa keiches hanefesh. The etzem hanefesh is misyachis to the esa keiches hanefesh. So now we're going to say chen hu beis lapshus haneshama beseichel u'midos da'agam shehi l'mayla miseichel u'midos, that even though that whilst it's a given that the etzem hanefesh is above and beyond the ischalkus and the hagdora and the hagbola of the seichel midas, the esakeichs hanefesh, umikomokim he atzmo mislabeshes beseichel midas. But nevertheless, it is, intimately attached and integrated with the seichel midas. For example, when a person is engaged in deep contemplative thought about a particular intellectual concept, the neshama at that moment is fully involved in the engagement of that particular chachma, to the extent that it can't be mislabish in a chachma acheres. Right? Yeah? V'yesh leimar. Let's start. This is a bracket. I say I don't think there's an end to this bracket. The inyan hatfis of islapshus mamish u'bekeich haseichel anelom shumakeir haseichel shebe'eshe maskol eiz askola hu nitfus mislabish mamish pozeh. Really, you could make a distinction here. We're not saying that you don't have to say that etzem hanefesh is mislabish in the particular haskalah that's going on at that time. You can say it's the koyach haseichel anelom. Aval be'etzem hanefesh hu bebechinas hakdor levad masha mugda b'hashbozu avloi bebechinas islapshus mamish. It's maybe saying islapshus a bit too far. It's definitely mugda. One thing is for sure, it's mugda, meaning it can't be thinking, it's not able to be maimik in another haskal. So the etzem becomes restricted in that vein. May not be mislabish mamish, which would indicate a far greater degree of hagdara und tfisa. Remember what we said before, we want to say that it could be nitfas, it could be mutra, it could be mugda, All these levels, which, if you remember if you looked up the Nun Aleph, you will see very clearly and methodically explained. So here you have something similar. It has this way in which the hashpah comes from the nefesh in a memela dika oifen, in a similar way to the sun, the way the oira shemesh is nimshach me hashemesh happens b'derech memela v'memela, and it's not mutrod in it. Doesn't get engaged, doesn't get occupied. It's not fanumum with it. It's something that happens because of it. Even when there's an eir chayza, meaning that from the keiches themselves there is a sort of a rebounding or reaching back into the etzem, like we explained in Ranat about dibur, that the dibur is magiat etzem hanefesh. Mikol mokim ha'amshach mishamu b'derech memela loy b'derech islapshus. The hamshacha that comes from the etzem hanefesh, which is caused by this eir chayza, which can happen in all sorts of kelim, but especially in dibur. It's not that the etzem is fun, then becomes engaged in being nimshach mislabish. Adrabah, it's nimshach menu b'derech me'elav u'memela. Geen ene nikra mekeila hakichis v'ashbosh nishboy mimena. You can't call it a mocker. A mocker is something that is engaged in and being a cause and initiating the hashbah. Fisha ene nimshach mislabish li is b'chinas mocker lehem. Rak shehein nimtzoyim mimenu. Kumay mayonis hanimtzoyim mihat tohim. That you can have a tohim, and from the tohim comes out all these springs. So the originator of these springs is not busy developing springs in all these different places. The springs come from it. If someone is chayfa ba'adama, they can draw a spring out of the ground. Doesn't involve any his askus of the tohim. So similarly, the etzem hanefesh is not mutrod, is not engaged, is not occupied with the act of hashpah. And then he says something interesting in the brackets: levad be'inyan ha'ilada, except when it comes to procreation. In that instance, which is a hashpah pnimis, then taka the etzem hanefesh, you could say, is mislabish in the tippa, in the drop of semen, which again takes you back to Ranat, takes you forward to Ranat in a sense. Raksha nefesh mugda bahashpa, it may not be mislabish, but the etzem hanefesh is mugda bahashpa. Why? Because the b'shash and maskil b'inyan zeh, skip the brackets to the last word of the line, einoi yochel be'esahi lahaskil haskalas achiris. At that moment is not able to be maskil haskalas achiris. For inyan ha'agdara, in truth, hu gam kin islapshus. The fact that it can't be misasik in other haskalas is a form of islapshus. V'yesh leima t'masha etzem ha'nefesh mugda ba'hakoiches hu b'chinas islapshus yoysa mimasha mugda b'guf. This is an interesting point. You could say, here's a yesh leima, that the relationship between the etzem hanefesh and the eser keiches hanefesh is more intertwined. There's more of an attachment there. There's more of an engagement there than you'll find from the nefesh bichlolus and its islapshus in the guf. So we've used throughout the Maimah so far. We've jumped between these mashalim of the neshama in the guf, levush hanifrad, levush hamyuchad. So we said that the way that the guf is the nefesh mislabish in the guf is a levush hamyuchad. And we also said that the way the etzem hanefesh is mislabish and the eser keiches hanefesh is also levush hamyuchad. But here he's making he's making a distinction. There's a way in which the etzem hanefesh is his slabshus in the keiches hanefesh is to a greater extent to the way that the guf is mislabish, the neshama is, and how he's going to explain how that is, the way the neshama is in the guf. So we both in Perik Aleph, where it was talking about levusham yuchad, didn't make a distinction. Here we're going to make a distinction, and altogether, one thing is, but this is within the broader point he's trying to make. The eina moshel doimel nimshal. How can we say this about the Eser Keiches HaNefesh that they have this level of being mugda? Yeah. Okay. V'ha'inyan. So Lamed Aleph, Lamed Aleph, the paragraph beginning v'ha'inyan. V'ha'inyan. Dini ha'hefresh bein hislabshus, bein ha'hislabshus da hagdora, lehislabshus utfisa mamashu. So first of all, what is the difference between hislabshus, which brings about an inyan called hagdara, and hislabshus, which we say is an absolute form of tfisa? The masha b'avurchinas hislabshus utfisa mamish hu sheyesh dem shayches elazeh. When can there be a greater degree of hislabshus? When the two things have a shayches to each other. So if we want to say, we're trying to say that there's a greater degree of hislabshus of the etzem hanefesh and the eser keiches hanefesh than there is in the nefesh, the way it's mislabish in the guf. The way the etzem hanefesh is mislabish in the guf is only a hislabshus which is in a manner of hagdora, meaning it can only be mislabish in that guf, it can't be mislabish in another guf. But it's not engaged in any way. It's not tied up in it in any way. The only way it's tied up is it can't be in another guf. But the way the etzem hanefesh is mislabish in the eser keiches hanefesh, that is a hislabshus which is b'chinas tfisa mamish. And the reason is, when something comes b'chinas tfisa mamish, it's because the two things have a shaychus to each other. Then there can be nitfas. The reason why the nefesh is only mislabish in the guf in a manner of hagdara, in the manner that it can't be mislabish in another guf, but nothing more than that, is because they're be'etzim, and they don't have a shaychus to each other. One's a nefesh, one's a guf. So the reason is that you can have a hislabshus in a manner of tfisa is when they have a shaychus elazeh, umagishim zeh achinasem yechu b'zulasi. Chudi kana. She'en ki masha hamugda nikre hislabshus ukumei hamelubish b'levush. The reason why we say something is mugda, we use the term hislabshus. What type of hislabshus? Not a hislabshus of tfisa. Hislabshus the way you like a melubish and a levush. You're wearing an item of clothing. She'enli shaychus be'etzem and a levush. You don't really have any connection intrinsically, inherently with that levush. She'en giluyov lefi oifen a levush. The person is not determined by the levush. You change the clothes, the person inside, the person wearing the clothes doesn't change. The clothes don't sense who's wearing them. It's not going to be affected because the person's moving. That's going to move. They're not intrinsically connected. When we talk about hislabshus b'derech only in a manner of hagdara, we're saying it's similar to like a levush hanifrud. Yeah. The nefesh doesn't have any real inherent connection to the guf. The evrei aguf agam shemagishim is a keiches. For sure, the evrei aguf feel the keiches. The sense that the eye feels the keich hariyah, the brain is magish the keich haseichel. Mikol mokem ena magishim is etzem hanefesh. The guf is not magish the etzem hanefesh. Lachin ein zichel ge'evrim v'lei kilkel eze evach hashoshon poinim shinu be'etzem hanefesh. And that's why any changes and damage or anything like that done to any particular part of the body doesn't affect the etzem nefesh. It affects the keiches nefesh, right? But only to the extent the keich nefesh is not able to be active there. Doesn't really affect the keich nefesh the way it is be'etzem, because that person, even if they're chas v'shalom, for example, blinded, they can still have children who are able-sighted. They don't lose the keich hariyah. Just at that moment, the kli is not a kli to it. That sense the person might have that they're alive. Person is not margish the etzem nefesh, because the etzem nefesh and the guf have no shaykhs to each other. The only shaykhs they have is that kol zaman the person is alive. That nefesh is not able to be mislabish in another guf. That's the extent of its islabshus. So the sense that the person has that they're alive, it's not from the etzem nefesh, from the orders on nefesh. Ha'ara klal is from the nefesh. Umasha etzem nefesh mugdum mekusha baguf who can wear halavush levad. It's like someone wearing an item of clothing. Cause man, you're wearing that item of clothing. You can't wear other items of clothing. And in this instance, he can't take them off. So the slapshus of the nefesh and the guf is much more similar to a lavush hanifra than it is even to the union of a lavush hamyucha that we described much earlier. Because the ha'aris hanefesh is mislabish in the Avery Aguf, it means that etzem hanefesh is also stuck there too. It's worth remembering by ikum mitzat keich hamafli lasei shemekasher ruchnis begashmis. The whole thing is a keich hamafli lasei is how the Eibushter is able to be mekasher ruchnis and gashmis, that the nefesh is able to be mislabish in the guf. Omnam masha nefesh mugda b'hakeiches, but the relationship that the nefesh has with the keiches hari mikol mokim yeshtem shayches elazeh. The etzem nefesh and the keiches nefesh have a shayches. Im kiyena keiches magishim mames ezem nefesh, even though the keiches themselves don't have this real self-awareness of that etzem nefesh. Ad she'eni yodua umurgish mitziyusay. Because the etzem nefesh is an etzem. It's not b'derech gilui. So how can the keiches and nefesh have any awareness of it? Mikol mokim hari b'halo is ha-keiches. May b'halo is keich sichli l'mekeirei. Hari ma'eirei is etzem nefesh. Sheyum shemisham gilu eir chadash. Through the Aveda of the Keich HaSeichel L'Dugma, through Kashis V'Tirutzim, through the Machashakim Heshivani, through Talmud Bavli, through the Eifen of Limud, which is Der Cheshach, person is able to Ma'ira through from the Etzem HaNefesh, Agilu Eir Chadash of Seichel. So the Keiches HaNefesh, they might not be Magish the Etzem, but they have a relationship with the Etzem. They must have some something must be there. Otherwise, how do they have this relationship? Skip this bracket. It's about 4 or 5 lines. 2 words from the end. B'kol zeh ba'etzem. You have it?
How many lines?
About 5. Kol zeh ba'etzem. The line begins nimshach b'chinas. Kol ze be'etzem hanefesh, aval b'keich hamaskil yesh leimar, sheba b'bechinas tfisa v'slapshus mamish b'aseichel hagoli, be'eish mashpia seichel. You can't. B'yesh shinu ben kedim hashba u'be'eis hashba shemashpia, v'agam she'ina nechzer klum me'am hashba mikol mokim hu shinui. No, what's this? Because this doesn't flow properly. Gilu chadash in kimher chlima shish igeher gneshnan. Because be'etzem hanefesh avul b'koya. What is it called? I'm not sure. I'm not sure how this flows. Aval b'keach hamaskil yesh leima shebo b'chinas tfiso v'islavshus mamish ba'aseichel. So the etzem hanefesh is somewhat detached from the keiches hanefesh. The keach hamaskil, which is the makir aseichel, that comes mamish b'tfiso v'islavshus mamish ba'aseichel agolu be'eisha mashbi aseichel, right? Yeshinu ben kedem ashbo be'es ashbo shemashbia v'agam shein enech klum be'ashbo mikomokim ushinu. There's a hisaskus. The keich hamaskil is mutrod. That's a nefesh is not mutrod. Maybe that should be. A second, let me just think this through. Could it be that yeah, I think that's the end of the bracket. If you read the sentence now, if you go back to Ahmed,
no end.
what?
The one that has no end.
The one I couldn't find an end to. So I'm not saying that's where the end could be, because if you read the sentence, because otherwise it didn't flow. Think about now how it reads. If you go back to Ahmed Lamed, the sentence reads, "V'cheinu b'slapshus haneshama b'seichel u'midos. Da'agam shila ma'ila miseichel u'midos. V'komokim hi atzmo mislabeshes b'seichel u'midos. U'komisha ma'imik b'daite be'ezad ava muskul. Hari haneshama mislabeshes v'nitfeses by chochma v'yidiyazu." Then go down. כל זה בעצם הנפש. אבל בכך המסקול יש להימר, שבו בבחינת תפיסה והסלבשוס ממש בהשכל הגולי, באיש המשביע שכל. וישינו בין קדם השפוע ובאיש המשביע, וגם שאין הנחזו כלום מהשפוע, מכל מוקים הוא שינוי. So all of this is about the etzem hanefesh, that it's mislabish, but it's mislabish only in a manner where it's mugda. It's not nitfas. But the keich hamaskil is nitfas mamish. There's a tfisa mamish. Av lamayla inishaim shleim makein chas v'shalem. But you can't say all of this about lamayla when it comes to Aaron Seif, and that's the spirits of Atzilus. K'misha kosav ani avai lo yishanisi, because the Abisha says it's not there's no different. It doesn't change. Ben kodim shnivra and ben achash nivra elam. Shlei shum shinu klab ben kodim shnivru v'netzlu elam is ben achash nivru v'netzlu. Pagam shaha'oir meir mislabish ba'eses firis d'atzilus. Hu bechinas ha'aris ha'kav shemulumish ba'eses firis d'atzilus. Now, even though there is an oir, which is the ha'aris ha'kav, which is mislabish and eses firis d'atzilus. Skip the bracket. Next page. Top of the next page. Mikol mokim ein ze oise shum shinu chas v'shalom ba'atzmus ein seif. Why? לפי שאין העצם נתפס ומסלבש בו זה. כי אם בחינס האורת לבד. So the Eirin Seif Shlifnei HaAtzilus cannot be described as being nitfas or even mugda in this hashpah.
Like the marshal.
Hmm?
In the marshal.
Whereas in the moshel it is.
It's levush, not properly nitfas.
It's mugda. Etzem HaNefesh is mugda because it can't think, it can't be engaged in any other hashpah whilst the hashpah is going on. It's not nitfas in the way the keich hamaskil is nitfas, but it's definitely it's definitely more attached than we're talking about mamash levush yuchat. And so the moshel of nefesh is a problematic moshel. Yeah? But this goes now, if you think like in the Nun Aleph, this is how what we're going to say now is how it starts in the Nun Aleph. Here it comes, it brings it at the end of the argument. The lochein mechanim kol hagiluim al yoni b'shem oir, v'loi b'shem shefa. That's why the Mekubalim use the term oir and not shefa. By hefreshu, the shefa hu sha etzem nishba. When it comes to shefa, the pshat is that the thing itself is nishba. Shifas mayim techasich shefa yomim. The mayim anim shochim imokim lamokim hariguf etzem hamayim em shnimshchu v'nishbu. Use the word shefa in association with water. That the water, the very water, is what is being transmitted or transferred. Ukmeikenu bashpos hanefesh baguf sha'etzem nishba kanal be'inyin hashpos haseichel the etzem keich haseichel nitfus mislabish bashpozu v'gam etzem hanefesh mugdu melubish b'zechuli kanal. So it'd be more appropriate to call that hashba. But when we're talking lamaila, we don't want to call it hashba. We don't want to call it shefa, because you have all of these hakbolas. Be mugda or nitfus. Yeah? Just in order to have we'll do this harder because it's this bracket because of the shaykhs to ranat. Right, so it's not a metzias dava, not the etzem is nishba, only a ha'ara. It's not like you can give over seichel, actual seichel. The only way you can enhance the seichel of the Talmud is when the Talmud already has seichel. If the student has no seichel, you're not going to give him the get the seichel. Through the hashba. It may only be ha'ara, but the hamshachas ha'ara is only shaykh when the etzem is mislabish. She'etzem, hainu etzem keich ha'seichel ha'nelem nitfus mislabish ba'inyan, oz davka nimshach mimenu ha'ara b'chin ha'seichel ha'gol. Seichel gol b'chli. This is where they suggest this should be the end of the bracket. So, whilst it may only be a ha'ara, the ha'ara is only viable when there is a degree of islabshus. Zo shenikra shefa, sha'etzem nishba, v'meila yu oisa shinu be'etzem. The chol meniya misnaneya ba'atzmai. So the shefa indicates that the etzem is nishba, and that it causes a shinui in the mashpia, because it's not comparable to the way they were before the ashba. Then it is beis ashba. Before the ashba, they could be thought of other things. Is ashba, they can't think of anything else. They're mugda.
The whole famous answer of Hagshan Ania violation Nisi. Oh, Tahar Levad, and therefore it's like Ayin Mamish, and therefore it doesn't make a shinui. But here we're kind of we're just basically saying no.
No, a ha'ara is fine. But what type of, if you talk, the manner in which the ha'ara from the etzem nefesh, and inviting the keich hamaskil is mislabish in the goof, right, is not in a manner of oil, the manner of shefa. There's different types of ha'aras. You can have a ha'ara which is in the context of like the oir hashemesh, right, where the ma'or hashemesh is not mutrat, is not mugda in the hashpa. They're both two forms of hashpa, but one is poil in a manner of islapshus. Sometimes islapshus mamish, sometimes just islapshus b'derech hagdara, that it becomes limited and restricted in that form of hashpa, like in the nefesh. But when you have like in the Ma'or Hashemesh, it's not mugda. So it's not. So it still needs to be a ha'ara. And this is what he was saying in this bracket here. Even though ima yoyis, it's only a ha'ara and it's not the atzmius. When you say shefa, you usually mean shefa dava. Here we're talking about only a ha'ara, but the ha'ara over here is dependent on the halbasha. So masha ein keinin oir hu shenimshach b'chinas ha'ara levad v'lei etzim klal. When we say the word oir, it's only hamshachas ha'ara and not the etzim. Einer she'ena etzim nitvus b'ha'ara tegilu ha'oir hu shelo yalidei shtadlus v'tirdus ha'mo'oir shenimshach memela v'lo yalidei hislapshus ha'mo'oir. When it comes to the oir, the inyan is that the etzim is bechlal, not fanumen, not engaged, not involved, not occupied with being mashpia, but rather the oir is nimshach mimenu me'ela v'me'ela. Ukmei oir v'ziv hashemesh hameir la'aretz adrim aleha. Ein shaykh leimesh ha'etzim ha'mo'im mislabish bashbo zu liyis ashbo mal bishase. Can't say that the Mo'ir HaShemesh is engaged in the act of shining rays of sun. Ki HaShemesh mimkeimei, the sun is in its place. Mumela nimshach mimenu ha'oil ha'oil ha'aretz. Based on where it is, the rays of sun shine on the earth. V'lochein anu roim sha'oil hu tamid ba'ifan echad. There's no change in the oil. V'loikum me'ashbo is ha'seichel. When you talk about hashpa, there are shinuyim. Shloi b'chol pam hashpa b'shaveh. You don't have the same hashpa every time. To the problem, it must be askolas amukis. Sometimes the hashpa that's going to come from the keich hamaskil is going to be a seichel amuk. Well, the problem, askolas pashtiyos. Sometimes it will be simple things. When the keich maskil is going to be fatifed and go deep into an inyan, then it be maskil askolas amukis. Uksheini maimik kokach einoi nimshach eimek haseichel. Simple as that. So there's a shinui. Chemash lepamim nimshach bekitzur ulepamim ba'aricha. Sometimes the inyan will manifest in a way of just very brief and succinct. Sometimes it will be with a lot of brevity. Having run out the whole union of Eirich and Eimek and Reichev, all these things are variable. So this aspect of the mashpia is necessary to define what's going to be the ashpah. It doesn't change. Because this oid is not being nimshach based on the engagement of the ma'od. And therefore there's no change in the shemesh. Despite this cloud, it's not affected by the oid. If the oid is not, if there's a cloud, it's good. Makes no difference to the Moir HaShemesh how it's nimshach. That's why it's b'shaveh. Similarly, you can use a mashal from an interesting mashal he brings now. You have a candle shining in a home. Ein shaykh loy meshahaner mashpia ha'ara al derech b'chinas shefa. You can't say that the manner in which the candle in a home is lighting up a room, providing warmth as well, presumably, is doing it in a manner of shefa. We said shefa. What is shefa? It's being the etzem inyan, and it's also torud in the hashpah. Actually, since the candle is a ma'eh, it's a source of light. Automatically it lights up that room. Not affected in any way by its activity of lighting up the room. If you put it in a smaller room, it wouldn't burn any slower. size of the room is not going to define how quickly it's going to burn. It's by the other Yamid Mesach Yimnu Iskalus Haziv. At least Rabbi if you're going to put a curtain and stop the shining, it's not going to change anything. There's no sense in which there is a shinui of ribu and miut in the candle. Like say, if you'd bring the candle nearer to you, you'd have more light from the candle than you would have had if it was far away. You don't say the candle is now shining more because it's nearer to me. It's shining exactly the same way it was doing before. It's just now nearer to you. Makes no difference to the candle where it is positioned. The difference is only that when it was further away, you were not able to appreciate or benefit from the light. And now you can benefit from the light. So what is the difference? I know the sibus matias ha'oy, but mokim hazeh. The reason why there's now light in this place, now you've moved it closer to you. Ain't no mitzadish tadlus haner. The ner's not trying harder. Shishtadl lahoy b'mokim hazeh. Ki mo'ir haner hu ba'ifan echad. Because the ner itself makes no difference, no change. Which is very different when it comes to seichel. The kir of seichel, about seichel cotton, in order for a person to be able to teach somebody and be mashpia to somebody who's of an inferior intellect, the mashpia has to work harder in order to explain. So it's a very geshmak mashal. To bring the inyan closer to the Talmid cotton requires an extra status in the mashpia. But for the candle, there's no extra status for it to shine nearer to you. It remains the same always. It's more about your proximity to the oid, your benefit from the oid, but the oid itself is not asuk in the hashpa, in being made the ha'ara. Okay, so we've now finished this inyan of showing how the moshel of nefesh, etzem nefesh lagabi keiches nefesh, and etzem nefesh lagabi the guf is not doimel nimshel. If we want to understand the relationship of Eidin Seif Shlamayla Me'atzilus and Esesfir Statilus, we can't rely on the moshel of the nefesh, because by relying on that moshel, you have the whole problem of it being mugda and mugbal, nitfus and mislabish. The better moshel is the Eivaz of Hashemish, and that fits into that whole other sugya b'chlolos about why the Mekubalim Dafka chose Oim, didn't choose Shefa. And we can now explain how this applies. This is a better way of explaining it in the next paragraph when we do the next shtickle on Lamed Gimel. Okay?